anything like that. So can I please have your name and why you copy my information? Please don't touch me.
Don't touch me.
This is my car.
Don't touch me.
I'm not touching you.
Don't touch me.
Stop touching me. You guys see this? Stop touching me.
Get away from me.
I'm by my car. Let me go.
Stop. Don't f***ing squeeze me.
Stop.
The morning air in Dane County, Wisconsin, was crisp. But the atmosphere in the apartment complex parking lot was already volatile. A white sedan sat parked in a disputed location, the focal point of an escalating disagreement that would soon shift from a civil matter to a criminal investigation. A female police officer stood near the vehicle. Her objective was routine. She needed to document the vehicle identification number, or VIN, to verify the car's registration status as part of a parking enforcement complaint. This is a standard procedure. It is usually over in seconds. But this time, a hand slammed down on the hood. A body interposed itself between the officer and the windshield. The owner of the vehicle, a woman named Regina, had decided that the investigation would go no further. She stood firm. She blocked the glass. This decision, made in a split second of frustration, would ripple through the legal system and change the trajectory of her life. It marked the precise boundary between a morning annoyance and a felony record. The context of the dispute was mundane, which often makes the subsequent violence more jarring. The conflict began with a call from the apartment complex management. A property manager, later identified by witnesses as the man in the blue shirt, had contacted the towing company. The allegation was simple. A tenant was parking in an unauthorized area. The space in question was not a marked stall. It was a zone previously used for loading, which the management claimed was now being treated as a permanent parking spot by Regina. The towing company arrived to remove the vehicle. Regina objected. She claimed she had received prior permission from a different employee months ago to use the space for loading children. She believed this permission extended to her current usage. The tow truck driver, caught in the middle of a he said, she said regarding private property rights, paused. Law enforcement was requested to adjudicate the stalemate. When the female officer arrived, her role was that of a peacekeeper and investigator. She was not there to tow the car herself. She was there to determine if a violation had occurred and if the tow was legally justified under Wisconsin statutes regarding private property impounds. To make that determination, she needed facts. The most basic fact in any vehicle investigation is the identity of the vehicle itself. The license plate provides one data point. The VIN provides the definitive fingerprint. Regina's perspective was one of defensive siege. She felt targeted. She believed she had valid permission to be there. In her view, the arrival of the police was an escalation of harassment by the apartment management. When the officer moved toward her car, Regina did not see an impartial investigator. She saw an agent of the property manager coming to take her property. She began to argue the validity of her driving status, which was irrelevant to the parking violation. "Are you saying, like, you're not a valid driver?" she asked. "I am a valid driver." She was operating under the belief that if she could prove her personal legitimacy, the investigation into the car would cease. She demanded to know the officer's specific purpose before complying. "Why do you need to copy my license plate? You're not answering my question," she insisted. She believed she had a right to negotiate the terms of the investigation. The officer's perspective was grounded in procedural law. She was conducting an investigation into a complaint. Under the concept of lawful authority, an officer investigating a potential ordinance violation or civil dispute has the right to identify the parties and property involved. The Supreme Court of the United States, in New York v. 5, Class 1986, established that there is no reasonable expectation of privacy in a VIN located on a dashboard, as it is mandated by federal law to be visible. The officer did not need Regina's permission to look through the windshield. She needed Regina to step aside. "Just got to get the plate off your car?" the officer stated calmly. When Regina blocked her path, the officer clarified, "I'm just going to get the plate off the car." The dialogue cycled rapidly. Regina demanded an explanation. "Tell me, why do you need to copy my VIN number and license plate?" she asked. The officer attempted to bypass the debate and perform the physical check. Regina physically maneuvered to block the officer's line of sight. This was the critical legal threshold. In Wisconsin, this action moves beyond verbal dissent. Wiz. Stat. 946. 41 covers resisting or obstructing officer. Section 1 states that whoever knowingly resists or obstructs an officer while such officer is doing any act in an official capacity is guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. The statute defines obstructs to include conduct that prevents or makes more difficult the performance of the officer's duties. By placing her body over the VIN, Regina was arguably committing a crime in plain view. The officer issued a warning. "You don't need my license plate," Regina asserted. The officer moved again. Regina countered. The officer's patience eroded as the obstruction continued. She issued a lawful order for Regina to move. Regina refused. The officer then made the decision to detain Regina to secure the scene and complete the investigation. "You're being detained," the officer announced. She reached for Regina's arm. The physical interaction was immediate and chaotic. Regina recoiled. "Don't touch me!" she screamed. "I'm not touching you." This statement was factually incorrect at that moment, as the officer had laid hands on her to effect the detention. Regina's reaction was to pull away, a natural fight-or-flight response that the law categorizes as active resistance. "Stop touching me!" Regina yelled repeatedly. The video evidence captured the frantic motion. The officer attempted to secure Regina's hands. Regina stiffened her arms and twisted her body. This escalated the encounter from obstruction to resisting. The tow truck driver, observing the officer struggle to control the flailing woman, made a split-second decision to intervene. In many jurisdictions, civilians are discouraged from involving themselves in police physical struggles due to liability risks. However, Wisconsin law and general common law principles allow citizens to assist law enforcement officers when an officer is struggling to effect an arrest and the citizen acts reasonably. The driver stepped in. He wrapped his arms around Regina, using his weight to immobilize her. "Get away from me!" Regina screamed. Now fighting two people. "He's a man. A man touched me. A man is not supposed to touch me," she yelled, invoking a social boundary that does not exist in the context of a lawful arrest. The combined force of the officer and the tow truck driver brought Regina to the ground. "Stop resisting," the officer commanded. "I'm not resisting," Regina cried out, even as her limbs continued to thrash against the restraints. This is a common psychological phenomenon in arrest scenarios. The subject feels they are fighting for their safety, while the officer perceives the movement as an attempt to escape or attack. The disconnect creates a feedback loop of escalating force. "You're not listening. Stop resisting," the officer repeated. Regina's focus shifted to the camera she had been holding, or the bystander recording. "You guys see this? Stop touching me," she pleaded to the lens. Once on the ground, the mechanics of the arrest continued. The officer worked to bring Regina's hands behind her back. "Put your hands behind your back," the officer ordered. "No," Regina shouted. "Okay," the officer replied, signaling an increase in leverage. Regina eventually complied as the physical reality of the situation took hold. "It's all my back," she said, indicating her hands were positioned. Handcuffs were applied. The immediate physical threat was neutralized, but the medical and legal fallout was just beginning. Regina immediately claimed medical distress. "Can I please get up now? I have asthma. So I have to get up. I have asthma," she stated. Law enforcement officers are trained to treat claims of difficulty breathing seriously, especially following a physical struggle, due to the risk of positional asphyxia. However, they must balance this with the need to maintain control of a suspect who was fighting moments prior. "No, you will stay right here until my partner comes," the officer said initially, prioritizing scene safety. She kept Regina seated on the ground. Regina continued to plead. "Can I get up? I have asthma. I can't breathe." The arrival of the second unit, a male sergeant, shifted the dynamic. The scene began to transition from active combat to investigation and documentation. The sergeant approached with a calmer demeanor, a luxury afforded by arriving after the cuffs were on. He took stock of the situation. The female officer was visibly shaken and injured. She displayed her arm to the sergeant. The skin was broken. The officer's got claw marks into her arm. The sergeant later noted, this injury significantly raised the stakes. Under WIS. Stat. 940. 203. Battery to a law enforcement officer is a Class H felony. If the prosecutor could prove that Regina intentionally caused bodily harm to the officer during the struggle by digging her nails in, the charges would escalate far beyond a parking dispute. Regina was moved to the squad car. She continued to argue her case. But her audience had changed. She was no longer a tenant arguing with a manager. She was a suspect in custody. I didn't do anything wrong. Again, I'm not being detained, she insisted. Despite the handcuffs on her wrists, the sergeant corrected her. You're detained until we figure this investigation. He explained the process. She would be seated in the car with the air conditioning running while they sorted out the conflicting narratives. The investigation on the scene involved interviewing the key witnesses. The blue shirt manager provided his account. Talk to blue shirt manager. The sergeant recounted to his team. He said that she was able to use that spot from a different employee months ago for loading and unloading kids. Not an actual parking spot. Apparently, she's using it as an actual parking spot. This confirmed the origin of the dispute. It was a misunderstanding of permission, exacerbated by time. However, the validity of the parking spot was no longer the primary issue. The investigation had pivoted to Regina's conduct. The sergeant then approached a new arrival, Regina's father. The interaction between the sergeant and the father provided a stark contrast to the earlier chaos. The father was calm. He stood with his hands at his sides, listening. The sergeant was respectful but direct. He needed to explain why a parking dispute had ended with the man's daughter in handcuffs. The officer then goes to look at the vehicle information to investigate whatever parking thing that occurred. The sergeant explained. Your daughter was blocking the officer from getting the vehicle's VIN number or plate, so she was impeding the investigation. The father nodded. He did not scream. He did not obstruct. He accepted the premise that the police had a job to do. Absolutely, the father said. The sergeant continued, detailing the escalation. The officer then tells her she's going to get detained. That doesn't go over well. And then the officer goes to put her in handcuffs, and then your daughter and the officer then get into a physical altercation. The sergeant did not sugarcoat the outcome. He informed the father of the injury. The officer's got claw marks into her arm. The legal reality of the situation was laid out. Regina was going to the Dane County Jail. She would not be released that day. She see a judge Monday, the sergeant stated. This is standard procedure for felony-level charges or violent misdemeanors involving officers, particularly over a weekend. The bond would be set by a court commissioner or judge. The father asked, "Oh, so we can't let her out today?" The sergeant confirmed. Not today. The charges were solidified: resisting and obstructing, likely battery to an officer. The sergeant expressed a moment of human regret to the father. I'm being real straight with you. I don't like this any more than you do, because this is over something ridiculously stupid, he said. It was a candid admission of the absurdity of the situation. A dispute over a few square feet of asphalt had resulted in injuries, felonies, and incarceration. I can't have her putting hands on an officer, the sergeant concluded. The father agreed. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll talk to her and let her know that. You know, your actions. You know, no matter whether you are right or wrong, you can't do that. The legal analysis of this incident centers on the concept of compliance. In the United States justice system, the street is not the courtroom. Case law overwhelmingly supports the principle that citizens must comply with lawful orders and challenge the legality of those orders later in court. When the officer requested the VIN, Regina had legal avenues to contest the tow. She could have sued the management company. She could have filed a complaint with the department. Physically blocking the officer verified the elements of WIS. Stat 946. 41. The prosecution would argue that the knowing element was satisfied when the officer explained her intent. Just got to get the plate, and Regina continued to block. The defense might argue that the officer's request was unreasonable, or that the detention was excessive force. But the video evidence of Regina screaming, "Don't touch me," while pulling away creates a difficult hurdle for any defense claiming lack of resistance. The claw marks present the most dangerous legal threat to Regina. While resisting is a serious misdemeanor, battery to an officer is a felony that carries potential prison time and a lifelong revocation of certain civil rights. The prosecutor has the discretion to charge this. They would look at the intent. Did she flail wildly and accidentally scratch? Or did she grab and dig in? The sergeant's description, "digging into me." Digging into me suggests the officer felt the action was intentional. If the medical photos corroborate deep scratches, the plea deal offered to Regina will likely require a guilty plea to the resisting charge in exchange for dropping the felony battery. The broader impact of such cases is a strain on police-community relations and the judicial system. These contempt of cop scenarios, as they are sometimes critically called, often stem from a fundamental misunderstanding of police authority. Many citizens believe that if they feel an officer is wrong, they have the right to physically stop the officer. This belief is legally false and dangerous. It turns minor administrative interactions into violent encounters. For the community, it reinforces the narrative of police escalation. For the police, it reinforces the narrative that routine calls are dangerous. The cost is borne by the taxpayer, who funds the jail stay, the court proceedings, and the potential settlements if a lawsuit arises. There is also a lesson in the involvement of the tow truck driver. While his actions helped the officer, they opened the towing company to significant liability. If Regina had been injured by the driver, a dislocated shoulder or a broken wrist, the towing company would almost certainly be named in a civil lawsuit. Corporate policies usually strictly forbid employees from physically engaging with the public for this very reason. The driver acted on a moral impulse to help, but legally, he walked a fine line. Regina's behavior highlights a missed opportunity for de-escalation on the part of the citizen. "Can you please tell me that, ma'am?" she had asked, seeking a reason. When the reason was not provided to her satisfaction, she chose physical interdiction. The takeaway for the public is clear. Verbal objection is protected speech. Physical obstruction is a crime. You can record, you can question, you can refuse to answer questions, but you cannot use your body to prevent an officer from moving to a place they have a legal right to be. The officer's conduct also faces review. Did she explain herself clearly enough? "I'm just going to get the plate off the car," she said. Could she have spent another 2 minutes explaining the investigation before going hands-on? Policy generally dictates that officers should exhaust verbal options before using force, provided there is no immediate threat. However, the law does not require infinite patience. Once the obstruction occurred, the crime was complete. The officer was within her rights to arrest. The subsequent struggle was a direct result of the arrest decision. Regina's father provided the final, perhaps most important, perspective. He recognized the futility of the resistance. "It's not the time or place to have an argument," he told the sergeant. His acceptance of the situation didn't mean he was happy his daughter was going to jail. It meant he understood the mechanics of the power dynamic. Fighting the police on the side of the road is a fight that cannot be won physically. It can only be won legally, after the fact. By trying to win it physically, Regina lost her freedom, her clean record, and her credibility. As the squad car prepared to leave for the Dane County Jail, the reality of the weekend set in. Regina would be processed. She would be fingerprinted. She would change into a jail uniform. She would wait in a cell until Monday morning for a bail hearing. The white car would likely still be towed, or perhaps released to her father. The parking spot dispute was rendered entirely irrelevant by the felony-level struggle that superseded it. The case serves as a stark reminder of the culture the narrator alluded to. A culture where no is treated as an oppression rather than a boundary. A culture where the camera is wielded as a weapon of validation rather than a tool of documentation. And a culture where a simple conversation about a parking space can devolve into a violent struggle that leaves scars both on the officer's arm and on the suspect's future. Regina is innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. But the video evidence created a permanent record of a morning where patience failed and consequences followed. The system will now run its course. Indifferent to the emotions that started the fire, the statutes will be applied. The fines will be levied, and the lesson will be learned. Too late to change the outcome of that crisp morning in Dane County.